With the consent of the Council and in accordance with the usual practice, I will invite the representative of India and Pakistan to take part in the discussion of the Council. I invite the representative of India to take his place at the Council table.
S'il n'y a pas d'objection, j'invite le représentant de l'Inde à prendre place à la table du Conseil.
I likewise invite the representative of Pakistan to take his place.
J'invite le représentant du Pakistan à prendre place à la table du Conseil.
Mr. President, the Government of India has given the consideration that to the statement made by the Honorable Foreign Minister of Pakistan before the Security Council on the 16th of this month. The consideration that a statement coming from a neighboring country with whom it is our desire to establish and maintain and continue the most intimate friendship, and from a person who has been associated with the service of India well over a generation and today occupies the place of prominence in his government. Before I deal with the subject matter, what is the textbook for this? The subject matter that is before us, I would like to make this preliminary observation. Yesterday, in India and Pakistan signed a trade agreement. If this were a mere trade agreement for the exchange of commodities, as may happen between peoples of any relationship, it would not have been of importance. This, like so many other arrangements that are reached between our two countries, marks a further step in our, I should say, with injustice, their desires to get over the difficulties that face us from time to time. This trade agreement touches not the fortune so much, but of the standards of life of our people on both sides. Therefore, in that background, I will endeavor to my best not to introduce any invective or anything that will be irrelevant to the subject before us, or in any way working against this current of cooperation and fraternity between our two countries. Now, where is the textbook? Where is the text of the speech? My God. The present consideration of this matter arises from a letter sent to the President of the Security Council by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is dated the 2nd of January 1957 and is in document 3767. It's important for me to mention this because as I develop the argument on behalf of the Government of India, it will become obvious to the Security Council that in this matter, it is necessary to place developments, phases, incidents, events in the right perspective. It is not possible to understand a problem, especially a complex problem which has engaged the attention of the two countries in the first instance and of other parties, including the Security Council over the years, to which I shall refer later, without having the whole of a picture, so that the significance of documents, the significance of arrangements, of declarations will become realistic and true to fact. In the end of October and early November 47. The photographic evidence. The Associated Press photographer, presumably an American, who was flying over a section of Kashmir Valley, extending within 20 miles of the capital. The villages in an area of 10 miles long and 10 miles wide had been set on fire by the Muslim invaders who were scouring the valley and moving in the direction of Srinagar. On the 10th of November, Baramulla, the city had been stripped of its wealth, and of young women before tribesmen fled in, and they fled in terror at midnight, Friday before the advancing Indian army. Surviving residents estimate that 3,000 of their fellow townsmen, including 4 Europeans, and the retired British officer known as Colonel Dykes and his pregnant wife was slain. When the raiders rushed into town on the 26th of October, witness said one party of Masood tribesmen immediately scaled the wall of St. Joseph's Franciscan convent compound and stormed the convent hospital and the little church. 4 nuns and Colonel Dykes and his wife were shot immediately. The raiders' greed triumphed over the bloodlust. A former town official said the raiders forced 350 local Hindus into a house with the intention of burning it down. The group of 100 raiders is said to be holding another 5 as hostages on a high mountain barely visible from the town. Today, 24 hours after the Indian army has entered Baramulla, only 1,000 left of a normal population of 14,000. This is a report by Robert Trumbull in the New York Times on that day. And we have no need to resile. We did not ask the Security Council to meet at the end of 5 years and to spend several days on this matter. Our sister state of Pakistan desired to do so, and we were anxious. We were prepared to come here either in the June of last year when there were rumors about it or at the present time. You, Mr. President, notified us about this meeting, and we are here. Now, what are these commitments? The commitment is that in various resolutions it has been said, it is the wish, it is the desire to refer this matter to the people of the country and so on and so on. I mean, I don't know whether you want me to quote all this again, but I quoted it so many times, it's all there. And no one, least of all any responsible person from India, says that the question of plebiscites were not considered at one time under certain conditions. And it is an error, if I may say so, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, to ask a government to consider what it has said, what it has offered, what is considered outside the context of any circumstances. Any lawyer around out here will know that even a civil matter, even a matter between individuals or inside a country, what are called the surrounding circumstances have to be taken into consideration. Now, give me the open hand. Now, the nature of these commitments are twofold. Plebiscite, I think, has first of all 2 aspects, and one aspect has 2 sub-aspects. One aspect is the commitment we may have made to the peoples of Kashmir. That is to say, what came out of us by our own volition in the context of the national life of India. Now, that is represented by the communication made by Lord Mountbatten to the Maharaja on the 27th, when he said, it is the wish of the government in accordance with our policy. It is the wish of the government in accordance with our policy. It didn't say anything about a plebiscite, to have a reference to the people. That might be any kind of reference. It might be a referendum, it might be a plebiscite, it might be a general election. It might be a Gallup poll, it might be anything. That was the position at that time. But let's assume it was a plebiscite. And then he attached conditions to it. Even he attached conditions. When this soil is cleared of the invader and peace and order is restored. Now, I can't seek the authority of my distinguished colleague from Pakistan on the question of peace and order, because in one part of his statement he says there is peace and order, and another he says it is not. I think he is right, because there is peace and order in the territory we administer. If therefore the meaning, now the next part, if therefore the meaning of a stipulation is ambiguous, this is very important, Mr. President. If therefore the meaning of a stipulation is ambiguous, the reasonable meaning is to be preferred to the unreasonable, the more reasonable to the less reasonable. Now we have so many pundits of English around here. Now what does that resolution read like? It says after, when, this, that, the other. The reasonable meaning is stage A, then stage B, then consideration of stage C. That is the reasonable meaning. And you cannot read any unreasonable meaning into that document. The adequate meaning to the meaning not so adequate for the purpose of the treaty. That is, the purpose of the treaty is to get a settlement in Kashmir. The consistent meaning to the meaning that's inconsistent with the recognized principles of international law. That is the first set of conditions in the interpreting of a treaty. The second, the whole of the treaty must be taken into consideration. If the meaning of any one of its stipulations is doubtful, and not only the wording of the treaty, but also its purpose, the motives which led to its conclusion and the conditions prevailing at the time. There are two things here to be taken into account. The motives which led to its conclusion. Distinguished delegates may recall earlier this afternoon, I referred to the anxiety of the Commission to get a ceasefire. I did not do it merely to draw a reference to the fact, there is some relation to this. The great motive in getting this agreement was to stop the fighting. And therefore, now to take on something which will lead to greater violence, that is not in conformity with this. And the conditions prevailing at the time, that we are going to deal with at length later. The principle in dubio mitius must be applied to the interpretation of treaties. Now this is again important. If therefore the meaning of a stipulation is ambiguous, that meaning is to be preferred, which is less onerous for the party assuming an obligation. And in this case, we are asked to be the parties who are to assume the obligation. And therefore, if there is an ambiguity, the meaning that is less a resolution under the names of Australia, Colombia, Cuba, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. I want to say here and now, sir, that I am making this statement today without any reference to this resolution. And the reason I want this to go on the record, I want the people of my country to appreciate that this resolution, I'm still claiming the attention of the Member of Security Council, this resolution has been put down by these 5 sponsors before they have heard the statement of India, especially after I stated last night that I have still to argue this case. I am not making my detailed comment on it at the moment. All I want Security Council to cease off is, for the purpose of this morning's statement, I am not taking that resolution into account. Now, the next point on which I want clarification or your ruling is that I would request reference to page 15 of Sir Feroz Khan Noon's, the script of Sir Feroz Khan Noon's speech. Therefore, the charges of non-performance in my submission, Brother Dixon, are wrongfully laid at our door. On the other hand, while we are not responsible for these, for the conditions of non-performance, as I've already pointed out, we have went a long way towards even departing from the assurances we had received, even allowing these rebel forces and these Pakistani forces on the other side to be armed, and virtually taking into account the position that the time had passed and some crystallization takes place. All that went by the board. And therefore, it is not as though we did not try very hard. It is not as though we did not meet Dr. Graham or Dr. Dixon or Sir Owen Dixon or any of these people, or even that the Commonwealth Prime Ministers agreed with the view of the Pakistanis. What is this? Whose is this? Yes. Now, at this stage, especially in view of the intervention of the distinguished delegate of Australia, I take the liberty of reading paragraph 21 of Sir Owen Dixon's report to the Security Council, and which is an important paragraph. And if the Security Council decides, I hope it will, that the primary concern is obedience to the Charter and the sanctity or the provisions of the Charter in regard to territories, then they will pay heed to this. Upon a number of occasions in the course of the period, beginning with the reference on the 1st of January 1948 of the Kashmir question to the Security Council, India can advance not only the contention to which I have already referred, that Pakistan was an aggressor, but a further contention that this should be declared. The Prime Minister of India, at an early stage of the meeting, that is meeting with Sir Owen Dixon, made the same contention, and he referred to it repeatedly at the conference. I took up the position first, that the Security Council had not made such a declaration. Secondly, that I had neither been commissioned to make, nor had I made any judicial investigation of the issue. But thirdly, without going into the causes or reasons why it happened, which presumably form part of the history of the subcontinent, I was prepared to adopt the view that when the frontier of the state of Jammu and Kashmir was crossed on, I believe, the 20th of October 1947 by hostile elements, it was contrary to international law, and that when in May 1948, as I believe, units of the regular Pakistan forces moved into territory, that too was inconsistent with international law. We have not held back anything that he says against us. But that is the finding of one of the investigators who, on balance, was not favorable to the Indian position. And the Azad Kashmir movement, the fighting forces of it today, this is 1951, number some 32 well-equipped battalions. This movement, Muslim in character, has become the center of strong and violent resistance to the accession of the state to India. It controls a considerable part of the western area of the state. It claims to be fully organized as a government, and its political activities appear to be directed toward the accession of the state to Pakistan. The government of India, of course, grants no recognition to the Azad government or this organization, and holds officially at any rate its existence to be a problem of internal public order. On the other hand, the government of Pakistan has rendered important assistance to the Azad movement. It has offered Azad officers, Azad forces, officers, the Pakistan Army. Units of the Pakistan Army itself are present in the Azad Kashmir and have operated in the closest cooperation with the local forces. However, Pakistan has not given formal recognition to the Azad government. That was in 1951. Pakistan informed the Commission, this is very important, Pakistan informed the Commission that it could not make commitments on behalf of the Azad organization. The Commission has never negotiated with the representative of the Azad movement, having no international understanding. Paragraph 204. At the time that the Commission adopted the resolution of the 13th of August 1948, it had reason to believe that the Azad forces did not constitute, it had reason to believe the Azad forces did not constitute a properly organized and equipped military force, and that consequently their disposal, once the Pakistan Army had withdrawn from the state, would not constitute a major difficulty. The Security Council must draw its own inferences as to why the Commission came to the conclusion at that time that was not a serious factor, because the Pakistanis did not tell them. In accepting the 13th August resolution, India apparently agreed that these forces could be dealt with after the truce became effective. Does that show unreasonableness on our part? 4 months later, during the conversations which immediately preceded the Commission's resolution of 5th of January, the Government of India stressed the importance it attached to the disbanding and disarming of those forces as a condition vital to holding a plebiscite, on which we have received assurances. The Commission agreed, this is the assurance, the Commission agreed that large-scale reduction and disarming of the Azad forces should take place. Provision for this is made in the resolution of the 5th of January as follows. But so far as we are concerned, even in order to redress our wrongs, even in order to restore our territories, to assert the sovereignty with this council is at no time challenged, and what is more, repeated time after time, to pursue the purposes embodied in our constitution, to establish the integrity of our land, we are not prepared to use force. But at the same time, in view of the threats that have been made, if our territory is violated, then we shall use the provisions of the Charter to defend what is ours under the law and in terms of our possession. And this is merely a very humble statement of the position of the government of India, and there is no relation whatsoever with our armed dispositions. I have with the utmost frankness told you what our armed position is. Ours is perhaps the only country in the world that has reduced its military budgets. We spent somewhere about 18% of our total revenues on military expenditure against 37% of Pakistan's. Our army has gone down in numbers and in its offensive power, while the other army has gone up. But believing as we do that it is not possible to equate this position, especially in the context of these military alliances, by entering an arms race, and that probably the risks of peace are no greater than the risks of war, we are taking this line. The Security Council, composed as it is, in the circumstance in which we find ourselves, not having considered this question for 5 years, and I hope in view of the submissions I have made, has a serious responsibility to pronounce on this question. I say the fundamental question is whether the Security Council is prepared to say to itself whether each member state whom the delegates represent is prepared to say for themselves that from an aggression, whatever may be the rights of the other side, from an aggression, other consequences beneficial to the aggressor can follow. That is the issue we are considering in other contexts, other places. And therefore, to disregard all that has been said by the Commission, and not in one paragraph, but in so many. And what is more, as I said this morning, to draft resolutions on this subject before another side has submitted its case is not to proclaim, representing the government of India as a whole in many circumstances, to tell our people that between the two of us lies the personality of your Prime Minister. If that is not an incitement to revolt against a government, I ask what it is. It is the only part of that statement that has caused our delegation intense pain. And that comes on the top of the kind of thing that is written in Pakistan. And this is from the Dawn. I am ashamed to read it, but it's my duty to do so. The Dawn is the paper founded by the founder of Pakistan. It's still regarded as a kind of most important organ, I believe. The Security Council will have barely 10 days to decide upon some concrete, tangible, unequivocal, and compelling step whereby that rapacious brigand of Asia, that hypocrite masquerading as an apostle of peace, with his hands red with the blood of Kashmiris as well as Bharat Muslims, that double-facing, double-talking, double-dealing Brahmin Janus, who shamelessly woos both Moscow and Washington in order to have the best of both worlds, can be prevented from accomplishing his designs. Will the United Nations this time act, or will it again temporize and shirk its responsibility? This is about the Prime Minister of India, who, when he went to Pakistan, and I make no odious comparisons, was received with greater affection than any Pakistan leader. Let us hope, says this paper, for the best, but also be prepared for the worst. The one thing certain is that Bharat shall not be allowed to grab Kashmir finally. So there's no question of diplomacy deciding what should. If the United Nations fails, and those with whom we have thrown in our lot prove faithless, there are the 6 military allies, let the world take note that the prospect of a peaceful settlement will vanish forever. The inevitable alternative need not be spelled out, but come it will. I do not say this is a statement of the Pakistan government, but considering that while the Security Council is sitting here, demonstrations against our missions are taking place in Pakistan territory, and what is more, those demonstrations are addressed and spoken to in cordial terms by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I hope, Mr. President, the Security Council will pardon me if I make references to this. Even when there are hostilities, even when there are very strained relations, there are proprieties to be observed. We have also a very sentimental population, not different from theirs. We have a larger country. We have pockets of Muslims all over. I come from a part of India where a considerable Muslim population forms a pocket. We do not want the conditions to be created where they will be the victims of fanaticism and of passion. Therefore, many errors have been made in this. The Security Council regards this as a dispute. It is not a dispute for territory. There is only one problem before you, whether you will face it or not. And if you will not face it, I say with great respect, it is a matter between yourself and the instructed judgment of your governments. And that problem is the problem of aggression. My country, when once that is resolved, and when all these elements of aggression are withdrawn, will not be wanting in its allegiance to the Charter to find an arrangement by adjustment with our neighbors, which will be to our common good. Any other procedures you may adopt will not only put off that day, but will aggravate the relations, which we are trying very hard to be otherwise. But it will also prove to those vast millions of the Indian people, and irrespective of all circumstances, they have many friends in this world, in all continents.